Hi, Lain.
Hi, how are you?
Good. I'm so excited to talk to you, fellow Stanford alumna. We were just riffing on our collegiate commonality.
Exactly.
I love that
So
place. So thank you so much for being here for having this conversation. I'm really excited to talk to you. You have a really interesting background in terms of how you've been able to develop your business, and so I think that's going to be really exciting to talk about. So
I'm excited. Yeah.
first, I'm just going to read your bio so that folks kind of know if they don't already know and love you, what you're up to.
Okay.
With degrees from Stanford and Syracuse University, Lain Ehmann loves developing creative yet practical solutions for individuals and entrepreneurs. She has worked with many leading online business owners and internet marketers, including folks like Pat Flynn, John Lee Dumas, Jamie Tardy Masters, Ray Edwards, and many, many more. She's the author of several best-selling books. She speaks, consults, and coaches on topics including online business, personal development, productivity, creativity, and community building. She has written for the Boston Globe, the Industry Standard, Entrepreneur.com, Selling Power Magazine, and hundreds of other publications, and she's spoken at dozens of venues, including New Media Expo, which just happened again, Blogger this year in 2016, NAMS, and the Smart Passive Income podcast, as well as some other awesome podcasts. So we are super excited to chat with you. I am super excited to chat with you.
Me too. Thank you.
So can you kind of just give folks a little bit more background into kind of what you did to be, sitting here in front of your maybe kitchen shutters, working from home, kind of running a business. What brought you here?
Sure. So I had one of those backgrounds where what I'm doing now has absolutely nothing to do with what I went to college for, which is pretty interesting because we were just talking about that. I got my undergrad degree in public policy and then my graduate degree in public administration, and had every intention of going into government on the administration side, so the non-political side, and very quickly realized that that was not the world for me. I worked at the state level and then the local level in a couple of different organizations and state government, local government, and just really could not handle it. Just I'm all about efficiency, about getting things done as quickly as possible. Let's set the goal and move towards it. And just dealing with all these different factions. I mean, take office politics and multiply that like to the nth degree. And it's politics, right? So I somehow should have anticipated that, but I didn't. So I moved out of that world and started writing more and more. Went into marketing, did some PR work, did some things like that, and loved writing, loved words. It's something I've always been passionate about, but didn't really think that I can make a living as a writer. This is kind of pre-internet days. Mm-hmm. So submitting to magazines required sending along your manuscript with a self-addressed stamped envelope and waiting a month or two. And it just was a very painful process. But over time, I kind of just ended up moving more and more into that world until the point where when my first son was born, and he's graduating now, we were just talking about that, graduating from high school. So he's 18. I was a full-time freelance journalist at that point, just building it slowly, pre-internet again, all local newspapers, and then moving up to larger magazines and things like that. And
you probably got a fax machine or something, right? That
totally,
awesome fax machine.
Totally. That it rings in the middle of the night and wakes everybody up. So I think my husband still has one. He holds on to things. So then I started writing for, I was actually at that point in time writing for a lot of business magazines and tech publications. A lot of them are no longer with us because this is right before the first tech boom and bust, right around 2000. And I grew up in Silicon Valley, so tech is kind of in the water. And so I was really good at translating high-tech jargon from the engineers and the developers into layman's terms that people could understand and relate to. So I had a little niche in that and I wrote for a lot of different publications. And then they started going out of business and I had more kids and I was thinking, I'm not really working all that much, so why don't I do something that I really enjoy? The tech stuff is great, but I got into scrapbooking. As a mom, it was 2000. People were starting to scrapbook. And I was like, I kind of like this. I get to tell my family stories and be creative, but I don't have to know how to draw. And fast forward, I became an editor for a scrapbook magazine because they needed writers. And of course, I can't just scrapbook. I have to make money at it. So was working as an editor for scrapbook magazine, scrapbook magazines started folding as well, as all publications have done. And so I thought, I wonder if I could do this myself online. People are starting to start blogs, so maybe I should look into that. So it was around 2009 or so, and I started my first website. And I had a following from the time that I was writing for the scrapbooking magazines and I was teaching classes. And so people started reading my blog, and then they started taking classes from me. And then I started looking at what other people were doing to market their businesses and decided to start producing online events, virtual events for the crafting industry. Most scrapbookers tend to be moms with kids, hard to get away from home. So I thought I'll bring the classes to them. So for about the past 6 years or so, there was about a 6-year period in there where that's what I was doing. I was producing these large-scale virtual events for the scrapbooking industry and really enjoying it. And then started kind of moving on in my life and in my business life as well, personal and business, and thought, you know what, I want to do something different. I tend to get bored, if you can't tell, and a lot of different interests. And I thought, I want to try something new. And because I had built this business very successfully, people were asking me how I did it. And so that kind of provided the path to doing some business and marketing consulting. And now that's what I do. I'm a writer, and I do a lot of writing in a lot of different fields. And then I also help business owners with their content strategy. So it might be word related. It's all words, right? Whether it's a webinar or a sales sequence, an autoresponder series, or social media updates, or whatever it might be. I help them strategize how to grow their business, get more customers, sell more products using communications strategically. So kind of a long story, but they're roundabout, but here I am.
Yeah, I love it. So I want to dive in a little bit more to this idea that, because I've listened to other interviews you've done, you were able to basically not only kind of start from zero in some senses of building up this 6-figure income scrapbooking, but then totally pivot. And now your focus is not really scrapbooking, and it's, other areas, as you were just explaining, and looking at other sort of themes with entrepreneurs like productivity and mindset. And so how did you make that pivot? Because that sounds really hard. I actually don't know which is harder, building up the first time or doing it the second time.
I think the pivot was harder, actually, because I had this business over here that was making money. And to leave that, consciously leaving something that's producing an income to take time away from that to build something else was much more difficult than looking at a clean slate. I had to take the Etch-a-Sketch with this beautiful picture I'd drawn and shake it up and start over, versus just starting with a clean blank slate. So it was definitely harder. And I think one of the hardest parts was I knew the value I had, having been around the internet world for 7-8 years now and done membership sites, done courses, done ebooks, done, you name it, events, webinars, done a lot of different things. I knew my value, but I was really having trouble packaging that value in a way that other people could immediately see where I would be useful.
Wow.
And then also to encapsulate it. So I had all these very broad skills. And at first I was like, well, maybe I'll do online events because I've done a lot of those. And I was going really narrow and deep. I was like, maybe I'll do online events. And I was like, gosh, I can't do that forever and ever. Maybe I'll write copy. And I was like, I can write copy, but I really like looking at the broad picture. So I was looking at all these little slices. And it wasn't until I stopped looking at trying to label it, because I'm a writer, I like to label everything, and just say, okay, this is what I can do for you. And then all of a sudden it was like, boom, people immediately started responding. And I mean, I get such different requests from people. Like one person I'm helping launch his podcast and figuring out how his podcast fits into the world of podcasting as a differentiated unit, but also how it's going to build his business. Because we can start a podcast, but you don't want to just spend all that time. You want it to do something for you.
Right.
So looking at that, and then somebody else I helped analyze their sales funnel because they weren't getting the conversions they wanted, and looking at the messaging from the first call to action to sign up for their email list to the autoresponder series to the actual sales page. Is there consistent messaging? Somebody else I'm doing PR work for an e-commerce company who is really successful but not really getting any visibility. So it's really interesting to see there are all these different tasks or activities or projects, but they're all related to content and growing their business and looking at it strategically in the looking at looking at the forest and the trees. So it's make sure you're planting the right tree, but it's also got to fit into the overall landscape. Right. I'm throwing tons of metaphors at you here.
So it's interesting though, because when you talk about, you had this business that was working, scrapbooking was working, and so you moved, and you shifted, you pivoted. Right. And so it seems like there's this quote you have in a book you wrote called Found, Rediscovering Your Dreams, Your Voice, and Your Life in 15 Minutes a Day. And you have this quote about authenticity and profit, which I think is kind of interesting. You say, authentic people don't attempt to bring others down so they can feel better about themselves. Authenticity comes from your heart and soul. So as a result, it is never cruel. Being authentic, it is never cruel, period.
Right.
And I think what's really interesting about that quote and about the story you're telling about how you pivoted is that you could have stayed in something that was working, but it wasn't, I don't know, it wasn't really your best self or something. And it's not necessarily that you were being cruel to the world by doing it, but maybe it wasn't your best you. I don't know.
Oh yeah, I definitely feel that, because I had a community of people that I really cared about, and a lot of them became friends over 6 years and scrapbooking is unique in that we share such deep pieces of our lives, because we share the stories that make it's not just photos, which is enough. I mean, you know how connected you feel to somebody that maybe you haven't seen in 6 years because you see their kids grow up on Facebook, or you see their house, or that kind of thing. Yeah. But take that a level or two deeper, reading these stories about their daughter's first ballet recital and how she, whatever might happen, these things that mean something to them. And we're really connected. And in one part of my heart, and I'm not like a touchy-feely person really, like I'm very expressive, but I'm much more a thinker than a feeler. I was like, I mean, these people, that I don't want to let them down. But then I knew I wasn't giving them my best self because my heart wasn't 100% in it. I cared about the people, but it was almost like I cared about them so much that I couldn't keep serving them half-heartedly.
Wow.
And it was really hard. It was really hard. Again, that pivot, like if I'd been starting with a blank slate, there wouldn't have been those relationships that I would need to back off or redefine, because I wasn't going to be serving them in the same way. So that was really hard.
So how did you do it? I mean, do you advocate sort of, stripping off the Band-Aid, or how do people do it, whether they're changing from one position to another, or from one niche to another, or if they're, leaving a full-time job and becoming an entrepreneur? Sort of what's the best way to do it?
Right. I think a lot of that depends on the person, because there are those of us who must take little tiny steps because the fear or the just not knowing the end game is the unknown is too much for them. So they have to say, okay, I'm going to do it step by step. Just like people, we were talking a little bit about side hustles. A lot of people need to keep their day job and build up that side hustle to the point where they can, shift the seesaw or teeter-totter and go from one to the other. I'm much more of a Band-Aid ripping off person. I tried to step, but it doesn't work because I feel like my soul's getting sucked out, and I feel like I'm betraying people because I'm not. Here I am talking about authenticity, writing books on authenticity, and then I'm showing up someplace and feeling like I can't be my 100% of who I am, saying the message I want to convey. And that just was a cognitive dissonance that I couldn't handle. So for me, it's like rip off that Band-Aid, get the slate clean again, and then I can build from there. That's what I had to do.
And so how much of sort of developing this new career relied on skills or talents, I guess, that you developed in the old one?
I would say almost all of it. When I look back over my history, I was just pulling together my bio for Blogger, which is coming up in August, and they were asking about like how have you ended up here? And I look at it, and I quoted Joan of Arc, who says, I was born for this, because I look back like my time at Stanford when I was a tour guide, and then when I did speech and debate in high school, and it developed a really analytical mindset to, through college, and even the time in finance for the government where I hated it, but I was really learning to analyze spreadsheets and look at things in a more quantitative sense, because I tend to be very big picture, through knowing how to create a membership site, knowing how to put together a product, knowing how to run an affiliate program, all those things. I couldn't be doing what I do now if I hadn't gone through that. In the writing, I mean, as a journalist, I worked in PR. I mean, every bit of that is called into use now, which is really, really cool, because in scrapbooking, it wasn't like that. There was one part of me that I really loved, very, creative and colorful and all this. And I got to teach and build, but there was a whole part of me that I wasn't getting to use. And it felt, it was just like, maybe like using one arm or something, or one eye, like I wasn't able to bring all of it to play. And it's like constantly like, there's another part. It's like if I were on a brain scan, like new parts of my brain would be lighting up, because I feel like everything's being used, and it's a really feeling.
Wow. So I think one of the things that's interesting about what you do now is you kind of reflect this thing I see in a lot of entrepreneurs, where you do different things and you bring them together into sort of one career. And I guess though there's this challenge with that, and you speak to this challenge in another quote. You say, when you understand who you are at your core, you can more easily sort through options, ideas, offers, and opportunities in order to select the ones that more accurately reflect your skills, goals, and values. And so I think this is just a really powerful idea. And not only do you have a lot of opportunities coming at you because of success, but you also have them coming at you because you do your work in different modes. So how do you think about this? How do you think about sorting and shutting down the noise and focusing on your best work?
Right. So there's the idea that a lot of opportunities come to me and they don't always fit. So I'm pretty good now after working for myself. I mean, when my son was born, I went freelance. So from that time forward, almost 20 years now, I've been my own boss, and or working for a number of different, whether it's a number of different editors at magazines, or now I have a lot of clients that I work for, and they're kind of my bosses, because I'm trying to meet their needs and their desires, although we work more collaboratively. But anyway, I'm really working for myself. I have that power to say, yes, I'll take this. No, I won't take that. So I always am interested in learning more. So that's something I look for. Is this something I have done before? If I've done it before and I feel like I've mastered it, there's part of me that doesn't really want to do it again. That's kind of what came in with scrapbooking, where it was becoming a routine, and that's great because you can systematize and outsource and everything. But to me, that's boring. I was looking for those new challenges. So anytime it's a new industry or something I haven't done before, then I get really excited about it. Then also, I think hugely is who the people are I'm working with, because I just finished up a project over a couple weeks. It was really intense for a couple who own their own business online, and they were so fun to work with. It was just like, it wasn't even like working. It was like we're hanging out, sending like GIFs to them of like a Simpsons character twerking, and I'm like, that's my criterion right there, is if I can't send my client a twerking video, then I don't want to work with them. But that's kind of where I am now. I have that luxury of being able to pick and choose who I want to work with. And that's just, to me, that's worth so much, because there's a lot of people who wouldn't be fun to work with for whatever reason. And again, it's kind of, can I show up like me? And if I have to somehow not show up like me because they don't have a sense of humor, or they're expecting something different or whatever, then it's not a great fit. So that's part of the filtering process there.
So if when you do kind of coaching or working with other entrepreneurs, what do you do if an entrepreneur comes to you and they say, I've got these two opportunities. I've got this one, and I know it's going to pay me $50,000, right? This is a hypothetical, perfect world where you know everything. And and I'm not that passionate about it, but it's good money, and it's good money. But then there's this other thing, and that's only going to pay me, $20,000, but the people are amazing, and it's going to be a unique challenge that I want to try, but I can't do both because I don't have enough time. What do I do?
Right, right. I think it really dives into that why. What is their why? Because there are people who and I've been in this place where at certain points in my life, I got to go for the money. It doesn't matter how mind numbing it is. I need that infusion of cash because I got tuition due, or, the boiler just broke, or whatever it might be. I just need the money. And if that's the case, I will never judge anybody for working for money. I mean, that's what most of the world does, right?
Yes.
Exactly. And then there's the idea of, is $20,000 enough for you? Is that going to justify the time you're going to put into this? Because maybe there's another opportunity out there that's 50,000 and you get the opportunity to do these things you want to do. Because oftentimes people do look at it really like either or. All or nothing. That's something I come up against a lot particularly in the mindset coaching, where people think, okay, I'm either in good shape or I'm not in good shape. I'm either being productive or I'm not being productive. Like there's no middle ground. So I often just try to pull back the view a little bit so they see that there are other options out there. And also dig into the fear aspect of it, because a lot of times people will say they don't want to do something and they'll justify it before they've even fully investigated it because they're scared of it. This over here, the people are great, it'll be fun, but actually it's doing the same thing they've already done, and they're just trying to talk themselves out of the scary thing into the thing that feels more comfortable for them. And I tell them there's a big difference. This is one I love. That there's a big difference between rocks in your stomach and butterflies in your stomach. And they feel similar at first, but you really, if it's butterflies, you need to do it. If it's rocks and that feeling of dread, then look for another option.
Wow, that's great. I'm scribbling it down. I think they can feel the same.
Yeah.
If you're not tuned in with yourself in any way. That's
really... Exactly. And I went through life thinking that they were the same for a very long time. So, yeah.
So tell me, you're talking to me, and I'm you in 2008 before I've started a blog, and I know I have some hobby, right? I like knitting, let's say, or something like that. And I want to see if I can turn this sort of hobby that has now become kind of a all-consuming passion into a real business. What do you tell me is a good kind of first step? Something that's not so overwhelming that I won't do it, but something that I could do and maybe see a little bit of traction from, that'll keep me doing more things.
Right. I think, again, a lot of times people have very limited views. I mean, just like when we come out of college, we think there's like 5 different jobs we could have. We can be like a doctor or a lawyer. We don't know what these people do. Yeah. They go to offices, but we think we have no clue. So it's really opening up that view again to say, okay, you want to work in knitting. Do you want to be somebody who actually knits for other people? Do you want to write knitting patterns? Do you want to work at trade shows for a knitting company? Do you want to color your own wool? I actually used to knit, so I've got I got all these ideas.
Examples.
There were people who test knit patterns. There's so many different things that you could do within that world. Make a list of all of them and really get into it in terms of, you could be a reviewer for knitting needles and knitting yarn. You could be a retailer. You could have an online store. So opening up that view first, because just because you love knitting doesn't mean you should start a yarn store. The scrapbooking world, we saw tons of that. People who loved scrapbooking started scrapbooking stores, and then a year or two later were out of business, either because they realized, just because I own a store doesn't mean I get to do what I love all day. And also they didn't necessarily have the business skills or the temperament for that. So looking at the options and then figuring out which one fits you, because there's usually so many more options than people imagine. And they think instead it's like this. I could do this, or I could do that, like scrapbooking. I would have people all the time, how do I make money scrapbooking? And they think that it's scrapbooking for others, when I actually did a whole series on 12 ways to make money scrapbooking, and only one of them was actually scrapbooking for others. So just opening that up first, that would be the first step.
I love that, opening it up. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, so just sort of, can you kind of in closing tell folks where people can find you and what you're really up to today and what you're really focused on and working hard on?
Yeah. So right now I am my son's graduating, so that's like the thing that's looming over everything. I can't believe it. It's like so weird, but a lot of my energy is taken up just with dealing with that and trying not to feel the feels. People say, feel all the feels. I'm like, no, I don't want to feel them. I'll feel them once he goes away. But work-wise, yeah, I just really help small business owners, entrepreneurs. That's kind of my sweet spot with people who have an existing business and are up and running and are ready to really either fine-tune their messaging or get more out of what they're doing or look at expanding. They know they should be doing a podcast or webinar series or whatever, or things are just not, the pieces are there, but they're not quite fitting right. I'm really good at looking at that big picture and saying, okay, this is where we need to jiggle things or cut things or whatever to make it all work together more smoothly. So across all industries, I'm helping people, mostly online entrepreneurs, a couple non-online or offline. It's hard to believe anybody's offline these days.
It is.
Yeah, but that's what I do. Everything from creating content, lead generation pieces, reports, to consulting on sales funnels and things like that.
And where can folks find you?
I am at lainehmann.com, and that's so easy to spell. I need a much easier name. It's LAINEHMANN.com. And I'm also on Facebook, Twitter. You can find me kind of all the usual places. Well,
thank you so much for this. Much appreciated.
It's been so fun. Thank you. I'm so used to asking all the questions. It was really fun
That's funny.
to be on the side. Yeah, I like it. I kind of like this. So. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.